Step into the captivating realm of Little Red Riding Hood, an enduring narrative that has bewitched countless generations of youngsters. However, don't be deceived by its apparently harmless exterior. Underneath dwells an intricate web of legendary traditions, sinister sorcery, and remarkable mysteries awaiting discovery. What transformed into a warning story for youngsters commenced existence as a disturbing and eerie account woven with elements of forbidden desire and mystical practices. Yet what distinguishes this narrative is the alluring prospect that its beginnings might be grounded in reality. Could the threatening lupin creature be something beyond a mythological beast? Might Little Red Riding Hood's narrative stem from an authentic documented occurrence? Accompany me on a fascinating journey through the primeval woodlands of legendary lore and tradition as we discover the twisting route that birthed this enduring narrative. However, prepare yourself, for as we progress further into the darkness, we might encounter a reality more disturbing than we previously conceived possible. The Brothers Grimm version. Greetings once more, devotees of shadows. Before we explore the abundant historical background underlying the narrative, let's initially scrutinize the most broadly acknowledged interpretation of the Little Red Riding Hood Chronicle. Countless interpretations of Little Red Riding Hood persist, with the earliest versions undeniably inappropriate for youngsters saturated in grim and adult subject matter. Nevertheless, the interpretation most familiar to us presently closely resembles the one released by the Brothers Grimm in their 1812 anthology. Within the Brothers Grimm's interpretation, Little Red Riding Hood is depicted as a kind and pure youngster. Her endearing moniker originates from the present of a crimson hooded mantle given to her by her elder relative, a cherished item she adorns constantly. One morning, Little Red Riding Hood's parent provides her a container filled with pastries and beverage. She instructs the youngster to deliver these to her unwell elder relative, but to recall don't converse with unfamiliar individuals and remain on the trail. Little Red Riding Hood vows to follow her instructions and departs into the wilderness. Along the route, she encounters a crafty wolf. The lupin greets her, masking his wicked designs. He inquires where she's headed and what her container holds. Unaware of the peril, Little Red Riding Hood naively reveals everything. The cunning lupin feigns friendliness and proposes she take her leisure and appreciate the woodland, suggesting she gather lovely blossoms flourishing just past the trail. Enthusiastic, Little Red Riding Hood ventures away, pursuing one blossom and then another, wandering distant from the security of the trail. Meanwhile, the lupin eagerly races to the elder relative's dwelling. Upon finding Little Red Riding Hood's elder relative in slumber, he rapidly consumes her. Subsequently, wearing her sleeping garment and nightcap, he settles into the bedding, his craving intensifying as he awaits patiently for Little Red Riding Hood's appearance. As Little Red Riding Hood nears the dwelling, she observes the entrance partially open. Upon stepping inside, she discovers her elder relative resting in bed, her cap drawn down over her features. The iconic conversation unfolds observations about enormous ears, vision organs, appendages, and ultimately, an oral cavity. With a malevolent expression, the wolf proclaims it's all the superior to consume her with, and instantaneously springs from the bedding and devours Little Red Riding Hood. The lupin then settles back into slumber, his rumbling breathing reverberating throughout the dwelling. Through fortunate circumstance, a passing hunter perceives the strange rumbling and chooses to examine. Grasping a pair of shears, the hunter commences cutting open the lupin's abdomen. He glimpses a sparkle of crimson, the unmistakable shade of Little Red Riding Hood's cap. With each slice, anticipation builds until abruptly, Little Red Riding Hood springs forth, quivering. Her elder relative then similarly emerges uninjured. Together they collect substantial rocks and fill the lupin's body with them. When the lupin stirs and attempts to escape, he discovers himself immobilized by the mass of the rocks and collapses deceased. This interpretation conveys a potent message encouraging youngsters to respect their guardians' counsel and cautions. It serves as a stark reminder of the hazards of interacting with unfamiliar individuals, highlighting the significance of wariness and compliance for their personal security. Perrault's darker tale. However, formerly the narrative communicated a considerably different ethical caution. The Grimms unquestionably reimagined the narrative from a preceding interpretation released in 1697 by writer Charles Perrault. In Perrault's interpretation, Little Red Riding Hood is depicted as extraordinarily attractive, characterized as the most attractive being who was previously observed. A substantial distinction transpires when she steps into her elder relative's dwelling, where the lupin beckons Little Red Riding Hood to accompany him in slumber. To the lupin's satisfaction, she agrees, discarding all her garments and sliding beneath the coverings. The recognizable conversation follows, concluding with the lupin's chilling response about consuming her entirely. In this interpretation, there's no valiant deliverance to be discovered. It concludes abruptly with the lupin consuming Little Red Riding Hood. Perrault finishes the narrative with a warning ethical advising that attractive, well-raised young females should never converse with unfamiliar individuals. He mentions lupin, but clarifies there are diverse varieties including those who are appealing, tranquil, courteous, and gentle, who pursue young females. These gentle lupins, he warns, are the most hazardous ones of all. Perrault's interpretation serves as a stark caution against the hazards of masculine carnal craving and the consequences of surrendering to enticement. This interpretation aligns flawlessly with the communal standards of Perrault's period, when he served in the distinguished court of King Louis XIV. Within this environment, young females from prosperous families were frequently courted by ambitious suitors seeking to advance their communal position. It's challenging to visualize the narrative without the recognizable crimson mantle. However, it was Perrault who granted this signature garment upon her. Prior to his interpretation, there was no reference of what the narrative's protagonist wore, nor was she designated as Little Red Riding Hood. Some theorize that Perrault's selection of attire might have been influenced by the representation associated with the shade crimson. Historically, crimson conveyed implications of transgression, carnality, and the demon frequently associated with disgraceful conduct. Additionally, crimson could represent carnal maturation, the transition into feminine adulthood and the forfeiture of purity. The false grandmother. It's broadly accepted that Perrault extracted inspiration from a traditional narrative known as the false elder relative when creating Little Red Riding Hood. This forerunner narrative possesses a grimmer disposition in numerous respects. On her journey to her elder relative's residence, the protagonist encounters not a lupin but a human beast at a junction who inquires whether she's selecting the route of sewing implements or the route of fasteners. The human beast arrives at the elder relative's dwelling ahead and consumes the aged female. He subsequently positions some of her tissue in the storage area and her vital fluid in a container. When the maiden arrives, the human beast encourages her to partake of the nourishment from the storage area. As the maiden commences her sustenance, the elder relative's feline speaks to her, declaring disgraceful is she who consumes the tissue and imbibes the vital fluid of her elder relative. The human beast then directs the maiden to undress and accompany him in slumber. She removes each article of garment individually, her bodice, gown, undergarment, and leg coverings each occasion, inquiring where to position them, and the human beast instructs her to discard them into the flames. As she enters the bedding, the recognizable verbal conversation unfolds. Yet this occasion, the maiden rapidly comprehends she is imperiled and feigns a requirement to utilize the lavatory. The human beast fastens a cord around her lower leg to guarantee her return. Perceiving the opportunity, the maiden cunningly secures the cord around a fruit tree before rushing away toward residence. The lupin awaits her return, only to comprehend too late he's been outwitted. One fascinating aspect of this narrative is the non-existence of any reference of the lupin's masquerade. Some investigators theorize that the protagonist was already cognizant of the authentic identity of the being in the bedding. Observed through this perspective, the gradual removal of each article of garment could be interpreted as a provocative display. Similarly, the verbal conversations could be perceived as playful taunting. Unquestionably, there's a peculiar and unsettling carnal undertone to this narrative. Witchcraft and werewolf connections. The exact age of the false elder relative remained concealed in enigma, as it was verbally transmitted in Europe until traditional narrative scholars commenced documenting these chronicles in the 20th century. However, the profusion of imagery connected to mystical practices within the narrative proposes a documented beginning of the 15th or 16th century. Within the narrative, the conversing feline stands as a significant element. During that period, felines were frequently feared, accepted to announce the existence of malevolence embodying either the demon himself or a sorceress in masquerade. Additionally, the act of ingesting tissue and vital fluid within the chronicle bears similarity to the sacramental ritual, the ceremonial practice of ingesting the physical form and vital fluid of the divine. However, this ingestion is of the tissue and vital fluid of her elder relative, so appears to be an act of mystical practice, perhaps even a demonic ceremony, a variety of inverted sacred rite. The incorporation of the human beast in the narrative adds another dimension of fascination. Although human-beast traditions have primeval foundations, the acceptance in human beasts emerged simultaneously with the acceptance in sorceresses, achieving a pinnacle of widespread dread from the 15th to the 17th centuries. It's valuable observing that our contemporary conception of human beasts as half-human, half-lupin entities differs substantially from documented depictions. Prior to the 1941 cinematic production, most depictions of human beasts either presented them in human form or resembling ordinary lupins. This transformation in imagery might illuminate how Little Red Riding Hood could confuse a lupin for her elder relative. The designation human beast also frequently served as a representation for the demon. When the protagonist first encounters the human beast, it is at a junction. In Western traditional mythology, a junction can be utilized to summon a demon to establish an agreement. It was accepted that sorceresses engaged in carnal unions with demons in exchange for their mystical abilities. Perhaps this is what is transpiring within the false elder relative narrative. The Werewolf of Bedburg. While the sorceress prosecutions of documented account are broadly recognized, what frequently goes unobserved is the prevalence of human beast prosecutions in the identical time frame. The infamous 1598 instance of Peter Stubb, also designated as the human beast of Bedburg, designated a substantial peak in the persecution of alleged human beasts, particularly in French-speaking and German-speaking Europe. Peter Stubb, a prosperous agriculturist, enjoyed a beneficial reputation in the community. However, underneath his apparently pleasant exterior lurked a perverse wickedness. According to his personal testimony, Stubb's existence took a grim turn at age 12 when he delved into mystical dark sorcery, ultimately encountering the demon himself. The demon granted upon Stubb a mystical waist garment, granting him the capability to transform into a ravenous consuming lupin. Peter admitted to murdering and consuming 14 youngsters, including his personal offspring, as well as 2 expectant females. He would pursue his unsuspecting casualties, frequently young females, carnally assaulting them before murdering them. When Stubb admitted to an illicit carnal relationship with his personal offspring, she was condemned to perish. Similarly, his mistress Catherine encountered the identical fate. Both females were combusted living at the execution post. Stubb was charged with sorcery, dark sorcery, consorting with the demon, consumption of human tissue, and illicit carnal relations. His execution on October 31, 1589 is one of the most merciless on documented account. He was positioned to a rotating device where tissue was torn from his physical form with burning implements, then his extremities were fractured before he was decapitated and his physical form combusted. The distressing prosecution of Peter Stubb reverberated throughout Europe, fueling the pervasive dread of human beasts. It's conceivable to imagine Peter Stubb transforming into a feared representation, potentially embodying the infamous Lupin character from Little Red Riding Hood. Historical wolf attacks. Another compelling aspect to contemplate is the documented frequency of Lupin attacks on humans. For centuries, Lupins were vilified and generally feared as human-consuming predators throughout Europe. Presently, our perception of Lupins has undergone a profound transformation, recognizing them as timid beings avoiding human interaction. One clarification for documented attacks could be the commencement of the diminutive Frozen period, spanning the 15th to the 19th centuries. In the midst of such unforgiving circumstances, Lupins confronted diminishing quarry, compelling them to encroach upon agricultural establishments or infiltrate urban areas in desperate pursuit of sustenance. As the bitter winter season of 1450 descended upon the French capital, a chilling dread gripped the metropolis as it fell quarry to ravenous human-consuming Lupins. The metropolis discovered itself exposed, its barriers damaged and weakened. A brutal collection of Lupins infiltrated the metropolis, led by a colossal beast with a blazing crimson covering designated Courtauld. At first, the Lupins quarried upon regrettable individuals who had succumbed to the frigidity. However, soon they became emboldened and commenced to pursue living inhabitants in merciless collections. In the initial month, the Lupins terminated 40 individuals. Yet in following weeks, they slaughtered several hundred more. Residents endured endless months of dread. Yet from the depths of dread, residents became unified. A band of courageous volunteers devised a daring strategy, dragging a terminated bovine through the thoroughfares to bait the Lupins toward the heart of the metropolis. In a climactic confrontation, citizens stood unified, hurling rocks and pointed implements until not a single Lupin remained upright. Specialists broadly attribute the Lupin attacks to infectious disease. In contemporary occasions, nations have achieved infectious disease-liberated status through immunization provisions, which is why Lupin attacks are almost non-existent presently. It's theorized that human-beast chronicles emerged as a method to clarify infectious disease in occasions of limited understanding. Ancient connections. Beyond documented circumstances, Little Red Riding Hood's chronicle intertwines with reflections of older narratives. The recognizable dialogue bears similarity to a scene from a 13th-century northern collection, where a trickster deity must clarify why a disguised bride exhibits peculiar conduct to a giant adversary. Another possible forerunner appears in an 11th-century text by a religious figure. In this narrative, a young maiden attired in crimson encounters a lupin while wandering in the wilderness. The lupin, initially aggressive, is softened by the maiden's purity, demonstrating divine intervention's capability. In primeval Hellenic civilization, a haunting tradition recounts a masculine who, after committing a heinous act, returned as a vengeful demon cloaked in a lupin's covering. To quell his hunger, fearful residents sacrificed maidens annually until a celebrated combatant propelled the beast into the aquatic mass. While bearing similarities, it remains ambiguous whether these primeval narratives directly influenced Little Red Riding Hood. Conclusion. As we emerge from the labyrinth of traditional lore and documented account, Little Red Riding Hood stands as an enduring narrative that continues to enthrall audiences. Its enduring attraction lies in its captivating blend of purity with darkness. This narrative serves as a reflection to our deepest dreads and offers insights into civilization's transformation. With each interpretation, we glimpse the superstitions and principles of bygone periods. Whether observed as a warning narrative, a reflection of documented circumstances, or an exploration of human consciousness, Little Red Riding Hood remains a testament to narrative composition's enduring capability to illuminate the darkest corners of our imagination. What aspect of Little Red Riding Hood's beginning surprised you the most? Share your contemplations in the observations below. If your hunger for insights into legendary narratives persists, don't forget to become a follower. Observe you in a future visual presentation.